Today's challenge is going to be to take on the oil leak at the oil cooler oil filter housing gaskets. Very familiar and common failure with the GLK with the M272 motor. I'll show you what that looks like. And 10-15,000 miles ago, this engine was spotless, looked like that all over. But now if you look over to the left side of the engine, the driver's side, US, you can see that the engine is starting to be covered with a nice grimy coating of nasty, dried on, fuzzy oil. And that's going to be because of the gaskets between the oil cooler here and this housing and the oil cooling housing itself that is connected to the block down that line. And basically the gaskets just get flat, they wear out, they start seeping a little bit of oil, and over 5, 10, 15, 20,000 miles it's enough to really coat an engine. So we're gonna have to get it out and get it fixed. The first thing I'm gonna do though, so I'm not tearing this apart when it's all dirty and grungy and nasty and potentially getting some of that grime into the passages for the oil and the water, I'm going to give it a little bit of a clean just to knock the worst of it off so that it is easier to work on and so there's less chance of contamination. Okay, I'm going to start out with some degreaser in the general area, which is going to be kind of a neat trick to get into, but I'm going to spray it in all over the back of the oil filter housing area and the cover that goes down onto the engine. Let it soak in for a few minutes. And the next step is I'm going to use my little power washer. It's not really super powerful. It's nothing like a car wash, which I don't really like to use on engines because it can force water into connectors and such. In this case, I'm not too concerned because the area I'm going to be cleaning really doesn't have any electronics in it. I just have to avoid these cam timing sensors and such up here. Well, that's a lot better. It is not perfect, but it's good enough. Those are the areas you just can't reach with the wand on my power washer. And now the bolts that hold on the oil filter housing are clean enough to get to easily, and the area around it doesn't have large chunks of debris to just fall haphazardly into the oil and cooling channels. So we should be fine. And I'm leaving the power washer out to clean the driveway because I'm sure it's a little nasty under there now. And one of the things you're going to have to do to get this out is to drain your coolant system because the ports to the cooling system in the block are open to the outside whenever you get this off, and you really just don't want coolant flowing out all over the place. You also have to remove the this upper hose as well as the thermostat housing. So there's you're going to be much better off just draining the whole system, and it's just a great opportunity to go ahead and do a flush and or a just drain and refill with fresh antifreeze. Okay, conveniently the drain apparatus is here just on the side. You don't even have to lift the car, although the front cover does have to come off. It's already off in this case for other work I've been doing, but basically your drain petcock is right there. Turn the petcock to the counterclockwise. You may need to use a pair of pliers or something. If yours is like mine, it's pretty stiff and needs a little extra attention. You can put a hose on this on the actual drain here. I don't need to in this case because there's a bucket there and it's not going to go anywhere. And remove the cap on your coolant reservoir. to let air get in and the antifreeze get out. Okay, while that's draining, might be a good time to go ahead and get your belt detensioned. The tensioner is right there in the middle. It uses a 17 millimeter nut on the front to turn it. And once you've turned it, you can pull it off wherever you want. I'll just take it off the alternator right now. And I would highly recommend having a diagram on belt routing, because I always forget how it really goes. So this will help me when I go to put the belt back on, because it always seems so obvious taking it off and always so confusing putting it on. Otherwise, you can just take a photo and refer to it. Okay, to get started on the removal of the oil filter cooler housing assembly, you want to drain the oil all into the sump. Right now, there is a fair amount of oil that's captured up in the top part of this entire mechanism, in the cooler, in the housing, in the oil filter itself. So removing the cap will release that pressure, and the oil, as you can probably not see there, will drain back into the sump. Okay, some people advocate draining the entire oil system. That's really not going to make any difference at all, because nothing you're doing here opens up the oil passages in the engine block anywhere near the level of the sump. The oil pan down there is where all the oil is now. So that's not going to really help you to drain that. Right, you're going to want to get this hose out of the way. It's a quick release style hose. Just pull the wire clip out of the way until it locks into place. And at that point, you should be able to just wiggle out the hose. Also, there's a strain relief here. This should come off. Okay, that's good and loose. Okay, now, just for convenience sake, I'm going to take the other side off as well. Alright, we're going to be pulling this serpentine belt tensioner out. You can see the T12, the E12 bolt here is easily accessible. Unfortunately, the other one is behind the pulley. So what you have to do is you have to detension that pulley to move it out of the way. You can see there's a little bit of a hook there. Basically, it's got a clever design that allows you to rotate that up and then insert a rod. I'm going to use an Allen wrench into a keeper hole to keep the pulley moved permanently out of place. So I'm going to do that now. Alright, unfortunately there wasn't room to get the camera in my hand and the wrench and the Allen wrench all in place there to see the process, but you can see I rotated it to the left using that 17 millimeter bolt there. Rotated it, and then there's an obvious hole. You just feel under the tensioner and you can feel where that little hook is, and the hole is right in front of it. So just run the Allen wrench along that bottom and it'll drop right into the hole. I used a 3 millimeter Allen wrench, and so now you can see I have access to that that last bolt to hold the tensioner in. Well, you can't see it because I can't get over there, but trust me, I have access. you can see the detensioner, and I'm going to leave the bolts in the unit so I can find them later. And this idler pulley is going to be in the way of getting to the bottom thermostat housing bolt, so it's got to come out. It's an E14. Alright, to get this top thermostat bolt out, you can use it's an E10, but really it's so tight up against a secondary air pump. You have two choices. You can unbolt the secondary air pump and just move it just slightly out of the way, or you can do what I do, and I'm just using an 8mm long socket with a 1/4-inch ratchet and break it loose, because that will fit just fine on the E10 bolt head, so that'll probably save you some work. So just go ahead and take that bolt out first. Always take the hard one out first, folks. That'll minimize the amount of torque on it, opposed to taking the other bolt out first. And try not to drop it. And the bottom one should be a relative piece of cake, although you should remove this electrical plug down. Okay, you should remove this plug. Okay, there's that. Okay, and a little wiggling around, possibly using a pry tool, will remove the thermostat housing. And now, and only now, you're pretty much ready to start removing the oil filter cooler housing. Alright, now we're going to start removing bolts. These are E12s. So, what I recommend is that you take them out one at a time and you place them in the same configuration on the garage floor or some safe place, so that you know exactly where they go, because they're all different lengths, so you really don't want to mix them up. If you do find that you've mixed them up, the rule of thumb is that whenever you put them in, they should stand out about 20mm. So you could figure it out by just trial and error, but might as well make it easy on ourselves. Okay, now the whole thing just comes out. And I didn't lose nearly as much fluid as I thought I might, which is good news. Alright, so now the next step is to clean up this mating surface here, to get rid of all this old gasket material. Okay, that's pretty good. Give it a once over with a clean microfiber, and we're pretty much ready to start working on the housing itself. And now I'm going to start picking out the remnants of the old seal, and you can see where it's been leaking. I mean, it's no secret that this thing was well and truly past it. The gasket is actually flattened down to the base, so there really wasn't anything preventing the oil from getting out. And once you start getting it out, it gets a lot easier. So go slow at the junctions so you don't break it and have to start over. Okay, now just a matter of cleaning up the old gasket from the surface of the interface around the outside. Alright, now that that's over, I'm going to remove this. Might not absolutely be necessary, but it's kind of in the way of this one bolt. So now the trick is to remove all of these, the bolts holding the oil cooler to the filter housing. Okay, they're all loose, so go ahead and take them off. Okay, now the housing should separate relatively easy. Might need to put a little bit of a pry bar in just to get it started. You can hear the suction releasing there, and you'll end up with pretty much the same thing you had during the last step, which is a lot of cleaning and picking out the old gasket. And at this point, we can start reassembling the unit, and I'm going to obviously put the oil cooler portion back together first. If you get a quality gasket, it will just, even though it may be a little deformed coming out of the bag, it will just sit in there nice and flush and flat. And now is a good time to make sure you got all the debris out. A little bit of gasket material is not going to hurt anything, but no use leaving any that doesn't need to be in there. So there are locating tabs. You can't really get it wrong. They will hold it in position while you install the bolts. Okay, going to loosely just snug them down, going corner to corner, kind of a star pattern. Okay, now I go get the torque wrench. And I would recommend looking it up on your particular vehicle. Mine seems to be 8 pounds of torque, 8 foot-pounds of torque, and if you're like me, your actual socket is a 1/2 inch, so you have to use 2 adapters to go from your tiny little 1/4 inch low torque wrench up to the spec. So let's get it torqued down. And you'll have to be very careful because at low torque, very often the wrenches don't make much of a noise. So it's real easy to just keep going thinking you haven't gotten there yet. It also helps to kind of know what 8 foot-pounds is going to feel like, which is just not a whole lot more than snug, to be honest. So let's get these tightened down. Obviously they weren't quite there. And you go back up here to double check the first one, make sure it didn't get loose. Okay, so this is together. Might as well, while I'm thinking about it, go ahead, put this back in. Okay, and then it's time to put in our last new gasket. Okay. And you'll notice that there are tiny little tabs on the gasket itself to hold it in the grooves. That's a very nice feature because you're going blind to this whole side whenever you install this. So it would be really super easy for this gasket to get out of place, which would result in a leak without any doubt at all. So you have to be very careful about that. If you're paranoid, you could put a tiny bit of RTV in the channel underneath the gasket just to help glue it in place temporarily. It shouldn't really affect its ability to seal. But I'm happy with the way this is laying. I will be very careful installing it, and we'll think through exactly which bolts are going to go in first so I'm ready for it. And now, before you put that in, would be a good chance to clean up the thermostat housing surface, mating surface. Now, as you can see, I have laid in a couple bolts in the housing just so they're there when I need them, and I need to very carefully place this into position and go ahead and snug that down just enough to hold it in place, and then rotate the rest of the housing to set that bottom bolt in, and I'm going to finger tighten them just to make sure the gaskets don't go anywhere. Okay, and very carefully run them down with my ratchet. I don't want any torque on them yet, so I'm just lightly tapping it till it almost bottoms out. And now I'll just run the other screws in. Okay, the short bolt goes in this kind of hidden one down here. And then the two longest ones go in here. And the one that's under the oil cooler that you probably can't see. And I'm just starting them by finger, leaving one medium length bolt that goes in the hole directly under the oil filter itself. Okay, and once again I'm going to use my ratchet just to run these down a little bit snug. Okay, that's good. They're all nice and snug, but not tight enough yet. So now I go look up the torque spec. Okay, the suggested torque on these is 12 foot-pounds or 144 inch-pounds, depending on how your wrench is labeled. So there's the click. Going to go to the bottom most. There's the click. Come up to the side ones. Click. The other side. Click. To the one that's the short bolt that's a number 2 from the bottom. All right. And I got one more up here in the center, and that ought to do it. All right. It's now torqued and in place. All right, next I'm going to clean up the old gasket from the thermostat housing. This one's likely to be a little crustier than the other, just because of the nature of where it lives. So I'm just going to really take my time and try to loosen it to get it off in as close to one piece as possible. Okay, pretty good. Not much cleanup left to do there, and I'm going to go back to my wire brush, and notice I'm using a brass wire brush. The reason is it's still very stiff and capable of scrubbing off the grunge very quickly, but the brass is softer than the metal, so there's no way it's going to leave any scratches on the metal bits that I'm working with. And get out your new gasket. Notice it is directional, so you'll have to give it a little bit of thought about which way it goes. And also, notice that it really won't stick too well. So this is a case where you definitely might want to consider using a little gasket sealer on the back side of this, just to hold it in place. There are little tabs you can see in the on the gasket that are designed to hold the bolts. So I'm going to put the bolts in so you can see how that works. Okay, and I'm going to thread them through just to leave those tabs in as good a shape as I possibly can. Okay, and do the same with this one. Now you can see that the gasket can almost not move at all, so we'll be good installing it like that. So there you go. Okay, now carefully place it into position. And I'm going to start the bottom bolt into the hole. Help keep everything from moving and shifting. And then do the same on the top using my 8mm extension socket and extension. Alright, these bolts want to be at 180 inch-pounds, 15 foot-pounds, so I'm just going to tighten with the 8mm socket. I could use the E socket if I wanted, but this is perfectly adequate, and I have to use it on the top one anyway, so. Okay, we're on. Now I'm going to reconnect the plug. And the sharp bite among you might have noticed that the little white clip that holds that in place went flying. Quite honestly, folks, I never found it. I don't know where it went. I'm not really too worried about it coming loose. If it does, I will simply replace it. So it's twisted position, so the little catch goes on top. Okay, it does clip in without the little piece of white plastic, so it's there to stay. Okay, now we can put on our idler pulley and our tensioner. I think I'll put the tensioner on first since it's a little less accessible. Okay, nice and snug. Okay, next we put on the idler pulley. Notice it's not really symmetrical. This side is flush. This has an indent that matches the shoulder on the bolt. So if you put it in the wrong way, the bolt will be standing out proud from the face of the pulley. So go ahead, get it started by hand. And then run it down with your E14. And make sure it's nice and tight. And we should be good to go. Alright, I'm going to put the oil filter back together. Some will take exception to this. I did an oil change about, just a couple 100 miles ago. So fresh O-rings, fresh filter. You can see it still looks marvelous. It's a quality filter. It's not one of the cheap off-brand, no-name filters that's going to collapse under a little pressure. So I am not at all worried about this causing a problem. So I'm going to spin it back together and snug it down. Alright, and now before I put the hose on, I'm going to go ahead and install the belt because it's just going to be just that much easier to deal with. And you want to feel for all the groove belts, make sure they're in place. And again, the reason I can do that so easily is because my tensioner still has the pin in it. So double check, make sure everything's lined up. This one particularly, you'll have to do this one by feel. All of the grooves are matching with the grooves in the pulleys. The flat pulleys and idlers, the belt is centered on them. Everything looks good, so it's time to go ahead and detension the system by getting my 17mm out. Alright, and getting it on the detensioner bolt right there. Take a little tension off, pull the Allen wrench, release the tension, and there you go. Bob's your uncle. It's also time to clip this back in before I forget it. Okay, that holds the hose, which now needs to be reinstalled. Okay, seat that one. Go ahead and slide this one into the clip. And seat that one. Push the clips down. Okay, make sure they're good and tight. Okay, not too bad for an old girl. She's got 170,000+ miles on her. And once I get the chance to get in with the pressure washer again and finish off what I lightly cleaned to start the process, the engine's going to look pretty much sparkling. So I'm happy with that. It's plenty good for my daily driver. And now it's just a matter of filling the cooling system and burping the air. Okay, first step is to pour in enough to bring the reservoir up to full or even slightly past full, which should then work its way through the rest of the system. Okay, that's about full. Now I'm going to start the car and let it start percolating through the system. Okay, that seems to be holding, so in all likelihood the level will drop over the next drive or two, which would be very normal. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to put the cap back on the reservoir, and I'm going to check very carefully for any leaks in the system on the hoses I disconnected, anything else I moved.